Hello and welcome to the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for being with us on your Monday. April through July marks severe weather season in Ohio, and it's the time of the year when conditions are most favorable for strong storms and tornadoes. It's only the fourth month of the year here in April of 2026, and so far we've already had 10 tornadoes recorded across the state. That's including in Geauga and Wayne counties so far. Now, in a typical year, Ohio will see between 20 to 25 tornadoes. That's according to the National Weather Service. But it is not just tornadoes that are drawing attention. Last Wednesday, hundreds of cars and roofs in Solon and Bedford, Ohio, were damaged by golf ball sized hail in a hailstorm. And then, of course, there are non weather disaster events. Lake County, for example, experienced its fourth earthquake of the year earlier this month. It was a magnitude 2.1 event that was detected about a mile and a half southeast of Madison Village. The Madison area is known for seismic activity, with the largest earthquake on record there measuring a magnitude 4.8. That was back in the 1980s. Joining us today in studio to talk about disaster preparedness, we've got Mark Christie, Director of the Cuyahoga County Emergency Management Agency. Mark, thanks for being with us.
Good morning. Happy to be here.
Also joining us by phone, we've got David Biger, meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service. Hi, David.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
And we have Sandy Mackey with us as well, Chief of Public Affairs at the Ohio Emergency Management Agency. Sandy, thanks for being with us.
Good morning.
If you want to be a part of this conversation, you can give us an email at soi@ideastream.org. We're not operating the call line today because we are having some technical difficulties. So if things look and sound just a little bit different here on the Sound of Ideas today, that's why. We do appreciate your grace as we're working through this today, but still bringing you the show that we had planned. So Sandy, I want to ask you, which naturally occurring severe weather or disaster events are we most vulnerable to in Northeast Ohio?
I think flooding is one of the top concerns, as well as severe weather such as tornadoes are probably right up there.
Okay, so flooding, severe weather, tornadoes. Mark, we'd like to do a bit of a speed round with you so we can talk about just kind of the high level, what folks need to do in particular disaster scenarios. So, tornado, what's the move?
So the good news is that preparedness is sort of agnostic of a disaster. There's really three primary actions we encourage everybody to take: make a kit, emergency supply kit, make a plan, and know how you're going to receive notifications and information following emergencies.
Okay, so make a kit, make a plan, have those emergencies. What's the basic advice in a tornado? That's, you don't want to be outdoors, right, in a tornado?
Sure. Yeah. But first and foremost, understanding the reliable ways you are going to get warnings about tornadoes, whether you're outside or inside. Understanding that communities across our county have different methods of notifying their residents, including our method, the county's mass notification system, which is we call Ready Notify. Ensuring you're subscribed for that system and that you're plugged into, again, the various warning notification systems of your community and also the areas where you work. But then if there is a tornado warning or severe weather expected, following the precautions, go indoors, go to the lowest level of your house or whatever structure you're in. And again, just making sure that you have the ability to maintain communications and understand when the situation will be rendered safe.
Okay. Now, for an earthquake, does it matter if you're indoors or outdoors in terms of if an earthquake happens, what you should do for safety?
It depends. I mean, I think it depends what kind of structure you're in, where you are, what you're proximate to. If you're near, potentially near structures that might have facades that could, be damaged or compromised during an earthquake. It's really situational dependent, but typically the prevailing guidance is to get under a sturdy structure, like a table or something like that if you're indoors, just to make sure that if lights fall or if there's any sort of objects in a room or space that you're in, that you're taking cover from that. Mm-hmm. And again, doing that typically is taking cover under some structure like a table or a chair.
Mm-hmm. Drop, cover, hold on. That's kind of the phrase that people have heeded on. Let's do one more here for flooding. Just tell me quickly, high level, why is it important to not try to drive through flood water?
Oh, yes. It's a great point because people underestimate how little the floodwaters are that could potentially lift a car and move a car. It happens all the time. If oftentimes somebody will come up to a flooded roadway in a vehicle and they will assume that it's not very deep, and they will begin to traverse that flooded roadway and then realize that the water is moving, and suddenly their car is moving with it. And that becomes a very dangerous situation for them and the rescuers that have to come and try to save that person.
Sandy, what are the most critical items that families should have in their homes if they're being concerned about preparing for an emergency?
Right. Well, we always say that planning is the first step to preparedness. So to have your family be safe and be aware and be ready for severe weather, start an emergency plan. I can't stress enough the importance of having a plan. Include all members of your household. Make sure everybody's needs are met. If you have a multi-generational home, ensure that everybody from infants to grandparents have their specific needs addressed in that plan. And don't forget your pets and livestock. So planning is part of it. And the other part of it is having a kit. So you want to make your plan. You want to have a communications plan. You want to talk about, meeting spaces, contacting people who you're going to get out, your contacts for. Have your communications plan. And then also consider having a kit. You want to make sure that you have your emergency kit ready to go. You are the help until help arrives, really. So, make sure that you've got your kit with 3 days supplies of items that you need to keep you and your family self-sufficient. Water, flashlights, extra batteries, weather radio, whether that be a hand crank or a battery-operated radio, first aid kits, cell phone chargers, so many things that you can add into your kit.
Okay, and batteries key for that. You mentioned a radio. Can you just break down for us why a radio is so important as we are coming to a lot of people on 89.7 WKSU right now?
Absolutely. You need to be able to get emergency communication. You can get your alerts and your notifications this way through different systems that we have aside for notifications, like your county mass notification systems, alerts from your media channels, all the different things that you use to get those weather alerts. But you also need to have something that's going to give you the all clear. You want to have a communication, and that's why a radio is so important.
And among the family, I'll go back to you, Mark, for this. We've talked about a communication plan here a couple different times already. What does a communication plan look like? What should people be thinking about in a situation where your devices might not work?
Sure. That's, that it's trying to think ahead. Obviously you have your primary devices, which are more often than not cell phones now. But in the event those devices don't work, what are the other methods you're going to plan to use to communicate with your family if a situation happens where you're all geodispersed in an area and you have to be reunited? Oftentimes, as part of that planning process, what we recommend is that you identify a central location that if you can't get in touch with your family members after following an event, that you all have the same central location in mind where you will meet up. To ensure that if all communications is disrupted, that we all agreed we were going to meet at the city civic center following a disaster, following an emergency, and you'll have that in your mind and your planning, and your family members will obviously respond accordingly if they can't get in touch with you.
If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about emergency weather and non-weather event preparedness on today's show to kind of kick things off. If you want to be a part of this conversation, you can email in a comment or a question. That email is soi@ideastream.org. David, I want to bring you into the conversation from a weather perspective here. Obviously, we know there are the warnings that come out and the watches that come out, which we'll ask you to break down for us in just a moment. But is there something people can watch for as someone who is a weather expert, maybe like a feeling or something in the sky that might clue someone in that an emergency weather event might be on the horizon?
It's an interesting question to ask in the sense that I would think, most folks out there are going to have a good sense about what the weather is like in their area, especially longtime residents. They're going to know, hey, I'm seeing dark clouds moving in on the horizon or things like that. But I think it's important not to rely on necessarily those visual cues. Thunderstorms can develop very, very rapidly. The life cycle of a thunderstorm can be 30 to 40 minutes, and they can come on very, very rapidly. So very important, I think, for your listeners to just make sure that they continue to be weather aware so that they are out there monitoring whether it's weather.gov, whether it is their preferred weather app on their phone, local radio, local television broadcasts, just being weather aware as they plan their day and knowing what to expect. We're going to go out there and we're going to have headlines out on our webpage, and we're going to put messaging out on social media to really draw the public's attention toward any potential hazards that are coming. So, if your listeners have social media, great. That's another place. We're out on X, we're out on Facebook, but going to the website as well, weather.gov/CLE. We're going to make sure to work to prepare people for what to expect in the coming days. And that's probably the best thing that they can do for just kind of watching and cluing in on where those threats are at. I would not rely solely on visual cues or indicators in the environment for that. Those can oftentimes be misleading.
That's very helpful to know. As we're talking about ways we can communicate things to people when maybe those systems that we're used to using that are so connected and dependent on Wi-Fi and all of those things, when those aren't necessarily available, what about tornado sirens in a neighborhood? David, at what point do those come on? Are we talking like tornado is on your block? When does that happen?
So the Weather Service doesn't own those sirens, right? Each of those sirens are owned and operated by the local municipalities, right? And so they're the ones that will be responsible for alerting those sirens. There are communities out there that don't have sirens. There are communities out there that will use those sirens to alert for many different types of hazards, right? And so I would caution reliance on the sirens, right? They're a great tool if you are outside, if you're caught outside during an event. But if you're in your residence, rely on the NOAA weather radios, the WIA on your phone, radio, television broadcasts. There are many other ways that you can get these alerts and many ways to get the alerts. And I would say don't just rely solely on those sirens. If you're expecting a siren to go off and you're in an area that doesn't have them, you now are putting yourself at even greater risk by doing that. So make sure that you have multiple ways to get those alerts. Again, NOAA weather radio, your WIAs turned on your phone. And it's important, and I should probably stress that the wireless emergency alerts on your phone, so those are going to go off for tornado warnings. They're going to go off when we issue a severe thunderstorm warning with a tag for baseball-sized hail or 80-mile-an-hour gusts, or for significant or devastating flash flooding, as well as snow squalls, dust storms, things like that. But if they issue a severe thunderstorm warning that's, let's say, your standard 1-inch hail and 58-mile-per-hour gusts, that's not going to alert the wireless emergency alert on your phone. It won't go off for that. But it will absolutely alert the NOAA weather radio, and radio and television broadcasts will pass those warnings along. So that's why it's very important. You can't just rely on your phone. You can't just rely on a siren. You have to make sure that you're receiving alerts in multiple different ways so that you simply don't miss anything.
David, I want to stay with you for just a moment. We're talking about those alerts. Can you break down for us the different kind of alerts we'll get in an emergency situation, whether it's a watch or a warning, or maybe something else?
Sure. So when you think about a watch, for example, a watch can be issued a day or 2 days before an event, or even the morning of the event, right? And that's just letting people know that, hey, there are certain ingredients out there, certain conditions that need to be met for severe weather to develop. And so the watch is exactly what we say it is. It's watch out for what's coming on. Or the analogy, I guess, in this case would be, let's say we're baking a cake and we've laid out all of our ingredients out on the table in front of us, right? So now we have a cake watch. And now when we issue a warning, and that's typically going to be on the order of minutes to maybe hours, that means that severe weather is imminent, it's about to occur, or it's occurring, right? And so that's just like taking all those ingredients, mixing them in the bowl, and baking them up. Now we have a cake warning, right? And so that's the difference. When we put out the watch, we're trying to let people know now is the time for you to start thinking about your plan, right? You've heard Sandy and Mark talking about the importance of making a plan and having a plan out there. The watch is out there. Know your plan. just be thinking about it. Keep it in the back of your mind. What would we need to do? When that warning is issued, now we need to be ready to take action, to act upon the plan, right? The first thing, obviously, is we need to take shelter immediately, right? So Mark talked about we want to get to the lowest level possible. We want to get to the interior rooms. We want to put as many layers and barriers between us and the outside as we possibly can do, right? And so we know our plan. How do we get to our safe space? Do we have multiple ways that we can get to our safe space, right? And once the event is over, once we've sounded the all clear, now it's important to stay tuned in to the radio and the TV broadcasts out there, because folks like Sandy and Mark are going to be trying to get information out to the public on what further actions need to be taken. And that's when you need to know your plan and what to do in response to that. So that's probably a little bit more than you were asking for there, but I would be remiss if I didn't connect those dots for your listeners.
I certainly appreciate it. I know I have the hardest time remembering. I just cannot get it to stick in my brain, the difference between a watch and a warning. So hopefully now I can use that cake analogy, and, we're watching all the ingredients, and the warning is you're getting ready to make that cake. So hopefully I'll be able to actually remember that now. So thank you for that, David.
And we all love cake, right?
We all love cake. We do. If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about emergency preparedness, whether that's for a weather or a non-weather event. You can send us an email if you want to be a part of this conversation at soi@ideastream.org. You can also send us a message on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Our guests with us, who we were just hearing from, we have David Biger, meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service. Joining us by phone, we have Sandy Mackey, the Chief of Public Affairs at the Ohio Emergency Management Agency. And here in studio, we have Mark Christie, Director of the Cuyahoga County Emergency Management Agency. I want to get to some viewer questions via email, and we'll start with Stephen. And Stephen, I'll address this question. Stephen's question I'll address to Sandy. So Stephen writes, I frequently watch a meteorologist who goes live on YouTube during severe weather across the country. Without fail, the various traffic cameras he monitors show people stopping their cars under overpasses to shelter. That is not a safe place to be in the event of a tornado or even high winds. I think the Departments of Transportation of states need to post warning signs on overpasses. Sandy, do you have thoughts on that comment from Stephen?
Absolutely. That's a great question and a great comment from Stephen. I'd like to say that, when it comes to Ohio EMA and where we get our weather information from, we go with the National Weather Service. They are our standby, our go-to, our reliable source for information. So, I do recommend that people follow their National Weather Service on social media. Check out their website. They always have the most up-to-date, as they are the entity that issues the watches and warnings. So they are a great resource, and I advise everybody highly to follow those weather forecast offices. And as for sheltering, there really is no safe place outdoors when there's severe weather. So if you're in your vehicle, we recommend that you put your seatbelt on, pull over to the far side of the road, make sure your seatbelt's on anyway, of course. But, you just need to be safe. You need to pay attention to the situation. Everything is going to be incident dependent. You may need to get out of your vehicle and get to a low-laying area and just lay down in like a lower ditch or a lower area of grass or something and wait the storm out. Or you may want to stay in your car, pull way off the road, have your seatbelt on, and hunker down low with maybe a jacket over your head and get below the window. It's not always optimal to try to outrun a tornado because they are very fast and very unpredictable, as I'm sure David will tell us. It's incident dependent, really. So what you think you need to do for your safety, because you are the help until help arrives. So when that storm is coming, make sure that you're paying attention to what you need to do. And it could be either of those items.
We have another question in from John. John writes, we don't have any safe place to shelter at home, no basement, and a manufactured home. John writes, we have looked at shelters through Home Depot's site. What's the most affordable, safe that you know of, or are there any programs to help? I'll ask you, do you have any thoughts on this?
A couple thoughts on that. It's a good question. First, excuse me, in the instance of manufactured homes, oftentimes if it's part of a development, there will be a designated safe space somewhere within that property, a communal safe space. So that would just be incumbent upon an individual to research and identify where that safe space is designated. If there's not one, then I would look toward the closest building that might have a basement or a lower area that would be amenable to people coming in during a weather event like that and using that space for that purpose. There is a safe room rebate program that the state of Ohio does offer, and I will refer back to Sandy on the status of that program. I believe it's still available, but there's a program that they offer that helps cover some of the costs of a project like that. So Sandy, I will refer back that question to you.
Thanks. Yeah, we do have a safe room rebate program. It's not currently open at this time, but you can find more information on our website at ema.ohio.gov.
Okay, thank you for that. Another email in from Morgan as we wrap things up, and I'll direct this to you, David. Morgan in Akron writes, I believe that climate change is pretty well established now in the scientific communities. How well are weather prediction models adapting to climate change, David?
So I think when we start to talk about climate change and we talk about discrete impacts from that, it's difficult for us to make the connection. I know a lot of people want to be able to say, well, climate change is occurring, and that's why we have X, Y, and Z. So it's very, very difficult, I think, for us to be able to make those connections. What we have seen change over the last few decades is that we've seen that axis of severe weather begin to shift a little bit farther east. It's shifting a little bit farther to the north. And so as we start to work on improving our own understanding of the atmosphere, we're studying those effects, understanding what is occurring. As an atmosphere warms, an atmosphere is able to hold more moisture in it, and that increases that heavier rain risk that leads to that flooding risk that we talked about earlier, that Mark mentioned as being one of the significant hazards that we have out there. But I think to your listeners' direct question about the tools that we use, the numerical weather prediction piece of that, we're always seeking to improve these models, right? And so as we continue to develop this, we're improving the physics, we're improving the way that the models bring in and assimilate data. So we can't really couple those two things together. Climate, by and large, is personality, and weather is mood. And so, very important for us to kind of understand those distinctions, that we can't connect one or the other together. But what I would say for your listener is reach out to the Ohio State climatologist. Speak with them a little bit. They'll help to inform a little bit more about how climate modeling is actually adapting to things and what they're doing to improve the climate modeling and reaching out there. So it's a great question. It's not a simple question. There's a lot of nuance that's in there, but hopefully I was able to kind of touch on just a little bit of the many things that are in play there. But it's more than just a three-body problem. It's a very big problem, and we've got a lot of really great folks working to try to solve it.
Okay. I want to thank you for your time here on the show. Caller David Beiger, meteorologist in charge at the National Weather Service. We appreciate you calling in. Thanks so much, David.
Of course.
And here in studio, Mark Christie, director of the Cuyahoga County Emergency Management Agency. Thank you so much, Mark.
Absolutely.
And also by call, we have Sandy Mackey, Chief of Public Affairs at the Ohio Emergency Management Agency. Thank you so much, Sandy.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break now. On the other side, we'll hear more about the Cleveland Metropolitan School District layoffs that were announced last week. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. We'll be right back. Here with The Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media, I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for staying with us. Earlier this month, the Cleveland Metropolitan School District announced that it was cutting more than 400 full-time employees. The cuts are made up of 150 teachers, with others being administrators, paraprofessionals, and nurses. We'll get more into detail on that in just a moment. But along with the staffing cuts, the district will close 29 buildings. The hope is to save CMSD around $150 million over the next 3 years. Now, it was last Tuesday that the board for CMSD approved some of those cuts, while there were protests happening inside and outside of the boardroom. We'll spend the rest of the day today discussing this evolving story. Joining us today, we have Cleveland Metropolitan School District CEO, Dr. Warren Morgan. Dr. Morgan, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
We appreciate it. Also here in studio, we have Errol Savage. He's the new president of the Cleveland Teachers Union. Errol, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And we have Connor Morris with us, IdeaStream's education reporter. Connor, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
If you want to be a part of this conversation, you can give us a call. The number to do that is 866-578-0903. You can also send us an email at soi@ideastream.org, or you can message us on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Now, as we start this conversation, I want to ask you, Dr. Morgan, the layoffs have been attributed to declining enrollment at CMSD. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, one of the things we shared during the past year, and actually a little bit beyond a year, when we've been going out talking about the need for our Building Brighter Futures plan, which, by the way, the Building Brighter Futures plan is our plan to ensure all scholars can have access to a high quality education no matter where they go to school, no matter which neighborhood they live in. And we're giving kids more while also saving dollars. But specifically, you were asking about the enrollment decline. So one of the things we found is that over the past 20 years, we've had a drop of enrollment of over 50%. And that's mainly attributed to birth rates, declines in birth rates, not necessarily students choosing other charter schools or private schools. It's mainly due to declines in birth rates. And this is not only something impacting CMSD, this is something that we're seeing in other districts in the county, the state, in the nation. I know I'm talking with a group of superintendents later this week, doing a talk on Friday where people are asking us, how are we grappling with this issue? Because everyone is really finding these same similar challenges as well.
I'm going to ask you a very forward-looking question, Dr. Morgan, and I mean very forward-looking, because we look at this birth rate thing that we're seeing happen at different places across Northeast Ohio and across the state. Something that I did read recently was that birth rates are lower now, but people are having children later. So does CMSD have a plan in place, or is it something CMSD is thinking about if that birth rate does skyrocket back up and you've now closed 29 buildings and have less teachers?
We can only do predictions for the kids that are born now. So when we were doing our predictions, we were only doing predictions based on kids born 5 years ago. Those would be our kindergartners. Now, of course, anything can happen, but we can't make predictions off of kids who are not here.
I guess it might be a nice problem to have. You've got to build some more buildings,
Exactly,
right? And you
yeah.
have the people and the property taxes and all of that thing to pay for it.
Yes.
Okay, so Errol, let me ask you, what has the reaction been like within the teachers union for the cuts?
Well, it's hard. This is a tough time right now to be a Cleveland teacher. We lost 300 of our members. And I know Dr. Morgan and I are trying to work on ways eventually to bring those members back. It's devastating. It's tough for children. It's the teachers that work with those children every day, the educators that are actually in front of children are still trying to understand why this happened.
Connor, you were at the meeting where there were protests. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, I would describe it as kind of a bit of a raucous response. The board was being interrupted from the audience, and folks, there were some students there with signs that were saying, "What about my teachers? Please don't cut them." And the board did not have a public comment period during this meeting, and so folks were saying, let them speak, let the students speak. And the board eventually recessed, and then they came back and said, well, if there's going to continue to be interruptions, we're going to vote on these layoffs, and we're not going to be able to discuss that. And that's what ended up happening. The crowd was a lot of teachers and educators and others and staffers and family members. They turned their back on the board when they've approved it, and there was some booing and chanting. And so people are really upset, and I've talked to a couple of teachers who have said, I don't know what I'm going to do now because other districts are laying off as well, and so they feel like they are in a really tough spot right now.
Let's talk about those numbers, Connor. Can you break it down for us? What do we know in terms of who was cut?
Yeah, of course. And these are always a little bit of a sliding scale, and this is not just the CMSD. A lot of schools say, we're looking to cut about this much. Dr. Morgan told me it was about 410 folks, full-time folks. Right now, what's been approved so far, it looks like it's about 310 people, 315-ish. 278 of them are in the teachers union, and then another 35 administrators were approved last week. And there's going to be more on top of that, more central office administrators. And then also there's another kind of 50 or so in there that we don't know which unions they're going to come from yet. We're seeing this in other areas as well. Lorraine is looking to lay off about 167 folks, and they've already sent out layoff notices to about 100 educators.
Well, let me ask you this, Dr. Morgan. How did the district come to decide when the cuts were being made, where the cuts would be made, who would be eliminated, what positions?
Yeah. Well, first I'll start by just saying how tough last week was, and understandably so. It was just a challenging week. Actually, past few weeks, we started doing announcements for some of our central office staff members around the spring break time, and so it's been, a very tough few weeks, but we're getting through it together, and grateful to work with Mr. Savage and other leaders to figure out how we can mitigate this and support our educators and our community. But when looking at this, so one of the things we've been sharing throughout the time of doing community meetings for Building Brighter Futures are our finances, and I think I've shared now our 4-year forecast, our 5-year forecast so many times in my 3 years now being the CEO, and though right now, if you were looking at our finances and what our cash ends at the end of the school year, you would see that we're in the black, but we're currently running on a deficit, and that deficit increases year over year. And if we were not to make any cuts or keep our operating model the same, we would be in fiscal precaution this fall, even with closing 29 schools. The district was in fiscal precaution when I inherited it. It went into fiscal precaution a couple of months of me coming in because of the loss of the ESSER dollars. We exited fiscal precaution, and I said we would never get back there again. We were going to work very hard to get there, not to get back into fiscal precaution. A couple of other things to note. When doing our Building Brighter Futures plan, our board charged us, I believe it was in October 2025, to save $30 million through the Building Brighter Futures plan. That's the consolidation, mergers, closures of the 29 schools, or 39 mergers altogether. And that was going to be both in the operational expenses, also in the personnel that comes along with the consolidation. $5 million at central office in year. So we actually found $5 million in year. And then on top of that, I charged my central office team when doing our budgeting process, which we went into the budgeting process around January to find $15 million through the central office budgeting process. So that's about a total of $50 million altogether. $50 million over 3 years is where you get that $150 million.
We have an email now in from John, a Cleveland resident, and I'll take this opportunity to remind our audience, if you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, that we are talking about cuts that are being made at the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. If you want to be a part of this conversation, the number is 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org or send us a message on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. So John in Cleveland writes in, how much of these financial problems are related to pandemic funds availability running out and a plan not being in place for when the extra money would eventually end? There's a follow-up to that, too, where John wants to know how much CMSD spends on each student per year. I don't know if we have those numbers, but Dr. Morgan?
Yeah, no, a great question. And it's a combination of a lot of things. So actually, I just saw someone who had just posted on social media. It's one of our former school leaders. I know she was a school leader when I was in the system before as a network leader. And what she was describing was, the district being in this same situation about 6-7 years ago, maybe even close to almost a decade ago, and the then CEO talking to school leaders about the need to make cuts, to potentially close schools, and at that time there were proposals that were on the table, some that went through, many that did not. But then when the pandemic happened, we did get about $500 million of ESSER dollars. Now I wasn't the CEO at that time, but understandably so, there was a lot of need across our system, and there were operational expenses that were used when thinking about our ESSER dollars, and those dollars could be used for the operations of the district. But in 2024, that was into my first school year being the CEO, we lost those funds. That was about $500 million, and that was why when we were projecting forward, we knew that those operational expenses, we would need to make cuts. In my first year, at my first State of the Schools address in November of 2023, I announced a 10% reduction at central office. We cut by 12.6% in terms of personnel. We cut nearly $200 million from the budget. And then each year we've been doing measures to bring our finances in line before trying to get to people. Well, we did the people at central office, but even thinking about the calendar consolidation from 5 calendars to 1, saving us $27 million over 3 years. All of these were measures that we needed to do. And I'll also say is when we got our auditor of the state report, it not only showed us about the administrative cuts we needed to make, it also told us we had way too many buildings for the amount of students it had. It confirmed and reinforced that we needed to close buildings, and that's work that needed to be done not only now, but over time. And maybe if it had been done a little bit over time, we wouldn't have to do so much at once.
Errol, do you have some thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, I agree with Dr. Morgan about inheriting a mess. That you walk into a situation and you're not fully aware of what's happening with school funding, the nature of school funding. We're always paying tomorrow's bills with yesterday's or the day before yesterday's levy dollars. Certainly some of this, with the email you received, we should have seen coming. But again, with the nature of school funding, you're always chasing after, or a deficit's always chasing after you.
And on the question of how much is CMSU spending per pupil, a lot more than a lot of other districts. It's like $25,000 per student if you're looking at like special ed specifically. There are a lot of special education students at CMSD and large urban schools, so they generally are spending a lot more per student. There's been criticism, though, of course, of CMSD's spending on administrators for a long time. Even before Dr. Morgan got here, there was a report I saw from 2017, I believe, that was saying CMSD had too many administrators. In terms of like looking from then to now, it does look like the district has cut back on staff a decent amount during that time period. Also, if you're looking overall at the school funding landscape in Ohio, a lot of schools and a lot of school advocates are saying the state has long underfunded public schools in Ohio. The funding system was declared unconstitutional, I believe, twice in Ohio, if not more, if maybe 3 times, by the state Supreme Court. And there was a new funding model in place right now. It's called the Fair School Funding Model. However, its costs are based on 2022 numbers of costs of doing business for schools. And so that, a lot of people are saying, look, CMSD, there's one analysis I saw from Policy Matters Ohio, which said CMSD could be getting like tens of millions of dollars more per year. And places like Akron as well could be getting a lot more money if they're being funded fully. The state, meanwhile, says, look, we're still giving you more money than we have before. We are trying also to be very sensitive to like the state's budget and to property owners as well. And that's where we've seen a whole lot of attempts to put in property tax reform lately. And that's been a huge debate. We've even got, a discussion right now about eliminating property taxes all the way in Ohio, and that would really throw schools for a loop.
Yeah. One other thing I want to share on that figure about if we were funded fully, and my chief financial officer shared this, if we were funded fully through the Fair School Funding Formula, we would be saving about $157 million over 2 years, and we need to save $150 million over 3 years. So that shows you how much we wouldn't even need to do these cuts. Now, we do need to right-size the district. We have way too many buildings. We don't have full, not in all cases, full classes, full schedules. So that's work we have needed to do. But that just shows you that if we were funded fully at the Fair School Funding Formula, we wouldn't even be here.
So we're talking a lot about the issues with funding from the state and how that's happening. And what we've seen is we have seen the state take over districts in some cases. So this is an email that's come in from an audience member that asks, what would happen if the state took over the school district due to financial trouble? What would that look like for students? This is happening in districts like Lorain and Youngstown. It seems like districts really fight against this, but Connor, do you want to share some insight into it?
Yeah, I'll start. And there's a whole suite of measures that can take place, and you have seen districts that have had this measure done. As a matter of fact, CMSD was under some type of a state takeover in the late 90s. And so when we think about this work, it can come from where the state is actually putting in their own team to run the district. run the governance of the district. There are measures sometimes that can be that can impact bargaining units sometimes when that happens. When we think about CMSD belonging to the community and having the community voice, that's one of the things that could be in jeopardy if the state were to take that over.
And very briefly, that's actually kind of where we're at right now. We have an appointed school board by the mayor. There actually was a change in state law because of issues with the school's governance and finances in the 90s. And also nowadays, it's very unpopular for a state to take over a school district. Right now, we're only at, I believe, Youngstown's the only one now in the state that's technically under state control. It used to be that your board, your local board, was no longer governing. Now it's the case where you've got your local board, you've got your own superintendent. The superintendent is generally appointed by the state, and also there is a board of the state that is overseeing all the decisions made by the board. So there still is a significant level of oversight that they throw at you. If you're on the way toward a high level of debt, the state will implement more measures. That's why Dr. Morgan was saying fiscal precaution, fiscal watch, there's one more. So there's a lot of different levels to it also.
And Errol, you've been with the district for 25 years, recently elected as the teachers union president. So what are your thoughts on this?
I was student teaching in the district when we were under state receivership, and it wasn't good then, and I don't think it would be any better now. The current political climate in Columbus and Washington, D.C. is really not as friendly towards public education as certainly any of us would like it to be, specifically in regard to funding. So anyone that thinks state receivership might not be that bad, let's not try it.
All right, we've got a call from Joel now in Cleveland Heights. Joel, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Please go ahead with your question, Joel.
Okay, good morning, good show. Chronic mismanagement of the school funding is an anathema to public trust. There's a lot of misuse of education dollars. The retirement fund is losing money yearly. And I don't understand why people who are educated in the upper level of education continue to promote asking for more dollars when it seems like the whole ethos of the Cleveland area is more concerned about the Browns than they care about their children. This is a mismanagement problem, and it's also for the educational leaders in doctoral education. We're having a dangers of hubris. I hope you folks realize that and look in the mirror and try to get a 50-year plan, not a 4-year plan, not a 5-year plan. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for the thought, Joel. Do you have a response to that, Dr. Morgan?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the comment, and it's really it's correct that we need to be great stewards of our resources. It's one of the reasons why our team works really hard to ensure that we have balanced books while also improving academics. Each year, even though there's been challenges, we've improved academics. We hit the 3-star rating in the first year. Last year, every single testing area went up. Our benchmarks are showing that students are progressing. So our educators are working hard while the resources are also limited. But it's important to us to show that we have balanced books, because if we were only just barking at the state saying, give us more, do this, and not making the tough decisions in-house, that would not be leadership. And so even though it's really tough when you have to make these decisions and stand before the community and, do the things that we've had to do, it's important so that we can plan for the future. And I do wish that there was more sustainability in terms of our funding formula, not only at the state level, but even federal funds that would allow us to do long-range planning. One of the things I always hope for, because having been in education, working in education for a couple of decades, both at the practitioner level and at the policy level, I know that these things come in ebbs and flows. And sometimes you get that Hail Mary that comes from something that is coming from the federal level, or a change in the state your funding formula that helps districts out. And so as we continue to do this hard work, we'll advocate for more at the state level, and also pray that maybe one of those Hail Marys will come around.
And I will say, school districts across the country have really only grown their staff sizes over time. And so I talked to Dr. Marguerite Rosa with the Georgetown Edunomics Center, and she's calling this the big shrink right now. Schools across the country are doing this where they've just added a lot of staff, and some of them it's support staff, it's counselors, it's psychologists, it's reading coaches, it's more support for students. But she's still saying we cannot keep doing this with shrinking enrollment for many schools. And also locally, there's been a lot of criticism, and at other schools across the country, of administrative spending. We've got a local blogger, and her name's Polly Carr. She's a CMSD mom and also a blogger, and she's been looking at smaller individual expenditures like $1,400 on a chair for an executive, for example, and she's been raising concerns about that. Spending on consultants as well. And I know, Errol, you've probably been hearing about this as well from other folks, but there is that level of people are kind of fed up and they're upset and they want to see improvement. I mean, Dr. Morgan here has been saying he wants to see improvement as well, but they're also seeing they question whether administrators are operating in good faith as well.
Errol, what's your take on the situation?
Well, I listened to Joel's phone call there, and sometimes it seems the more things change, the more they stay the same. He talked about a city that's more focused on football teams or stadiums, but in 1998, when we were under state receivership, in 1998 had a mayor that was very focused on getting a football stadium. It looks like we're going to lose a football stadium. So, when Joel talks about the priorities of the public needs to direct what those priorities are. And I think the public schools are a priority for the public. This, I would love to see some specifics that Joel has where he talks about mismanagement. I don't really agree with that characterization. I think there's some misallocations going on. I think we could do different allocations with the district as far as how they spend their resources, but I'm not saying there's mismanagement. I think the focus has to be on figuring out a method of school funding that's fair for all children in the state of Ohio, not some children. And, we want everyone's children to be treated the same way we would want our children to be treated. And I think consistently the state of Ohio just hasn't lived up to that promise. We talked about court cases that go back to the time when I was a child, and we still haven't figured this out. It's clear to me that people in the state of Ohio love children. Do they love other people's children? Do they love children that don't look like their children? And I think at the end of the day, Cleveland is really at the forefront of this. And I appreciate the conversations, and they're tough conversations that I'm having with our superintendent and even our board president. But I specifically appreciate that both of them are talking to me now, and we're going to try and figure something out.
Connor, as we kind of start to wrap things up here, can you give us a bit of a bigger picture of what's happening in the state? There are other school districts facing financial hardships and dealing with staff layoffs, not just CMSD.
Yeah, and I mean, we're covering schools that are laying folks off and they're ending open enrollment policies. They're closing buildings from Cuyahoga Falls to Norton. Lorraine, as I mentioned, is laying off a lot of folks. Canton Schools is laying off about 70 folks. So as I said, there's this kind of big shrink going on right now. And also, as you heard Errol mention as well, the state's priorities are constantly being questioned as well. There's more than $1 billion going per year to private school vouchers in Ohio. A lot of folks are saying, well, why can't that money go to public schools? So there's this big conversation happening right now about what is the best way to appropriately fund schools? Is the state doing it? A lot of advocates are arguing they are not. And schools are saying, look, we're hurting because of it, and we're laying off teachers because of it.
Errol, I want to ask you, we've got just a couple moments here. Have you been in contact with any of the people who were part of this round of eliminations and heard anything from them?
Quite a few of them. And I've widely disseminated my own personal phone number, and many of them have talked to me. I do go to buildings as I can and talk with the people that have been laid off. I was laid off for 11 months back in 04, 05. I did day-to-day subbing, then eventually was recalled as a building sub, and I'm trying to figure something out with our superintendent and board president to see if we can get as many of these people back as we can as soon as possible.
In a couple words, if I had to ask you your outlook for the future of CMSD, is it negative, optimistic, neutral? What do you think?
No, absolutely positive. We're going to figure this out. We always have before. These are not new problems that we're facing. In Cleveland, this is par for the course. we were due for a correction, and now we've got it. And I think that we're going to figure this out together. The public is giving us their solutions. I think that Dr. Morgan and our board chair, Sarah Ellicott, are solution-driven. I'm optimistic and looking forward with excited anticipation and working with them to figure out the problems that we're facing.
All right. That's all the time we have today for our conversation. I want to thank our panel for being here. Errol Savage, president of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District Teachers Union. Thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Dr. Warren Morgan, CEO of Cleveland Metropolitan School District. We appreciate the time.
Thank you so much.
And our education reporter from IdeaStream Public Media, Connor Morris. Connor, thank you very much.
Of course, we'll keep covering it.
Yes, we certainly will. That will wrap up the show for today. You can hear a rebroadcast tonight at 9 on 89.7 WKSU if you missed any part of the show. You can also catch every episode of The Sound of Ideas wherever you get your podcasts and on the IdeaStream Public Media YouTube page. To get the last word on today's topics, you can email us at soi@ideastream.org. On Thursday, we talked about the Michelin Guide coming to the Cleveland area, and Lyndon wrote in, I would like to recommend Artis in Lakewood for your upcoming Michelin visit reporting. It's a unique menu that changes seasonally, and it promotes local producers. Its ambiance and shareable plates set it apart from Cleveland area restaurants. And they regularly travel an hour from Chardon to eat there. Thank you for those thoughts, Lyndon. I can tell you I had an amazing tuna steak at Artis. Highly recommend. Tomorrow, we're talking about animal migration. This is in partnership with student journalists at the broadcast pre-production class at Cleveland State University. This has been The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you back here tomorrow.